Ariana Grande, Moana 2, Max Original Series. There are a lot of things having a moment right now, but when it comes to living their best life, nothing compares to how Formula One is thriving at this point in time. Here are just a few numbers to show you why the world's largest motorsport series has been killing it as of late. F1 is averaging more than 1.5 billion global viewers per season. Top drivers like Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton are making over $50 million annually, not including endorsements. And every single Formula One team is now worth more than $1 billion. These types of numbers are mind-blowing, especially when you consider the fact that Red Bull paid just one measly dollar to buy the Jaguar F1 team just 2 decades ago. The times are a-changin' indeed, but a lot of that change has been driven, pun absolutely intended, by Liberty Media. The US-based company purchased the sport in 2017 at an enterprise value of $8 billion. Since then, they've introduced a number of drastic changes to the sport, including a partnership with Netflix for its Drive to Survive series, as well as the introduction of a cost cap. Now, just 7 years later, Formula One trades at an enterprise value of $20 billion, and suddenly, everyone wants to get in on that action. Following a year of endless rumors and speculation, Formula One officially announced last week it would be adding an 11th team to the grid. The new addition, run by General Motors and its Cadillac brand, will now get the opportunity of a lifetime. Pay hundreds of millions for the opportunity to spend billions. And when they line up for their first race in 2026, GM's Cadillac brand will be the first US-based automaker team to compete in a Formula One race in 50 years. Now, there are a lot of questions you might be asking right now. How much will it cost GM to join Formula One? Who will they hire to drive? Will they even be competitive? Then, considering how much Formula One is already growing, why did the sport's governing body decide now was the best time to add another team? The expansion process in professional sports is often more complicated and confusing than it needs to be. And Formula One is no exception. After a year filled with whispers that Michael Andretti was in talks to buy a team, many Formula One fans were shocked to see the most recent press release didn't even mention the American's name. There are a few reasons for that. First of all, Andretti's bombastic approach to securing an expansion team rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, including Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff, who publicly spoke about how Andretti's bid didn't add enough value to the sport. So Formula One looked at Andretti's offering and antics and essentially said, "You're rich, but not rich enough to act like that." This is where General Motors comes into play. It already made sense to add GM to the bid since its Cadillac brand was already included in the initial bid, not to mention that Michael Andretti is no longer involved after stepping down from his lead executive role at the Andretti Global Racing team earlier this year. Having said that, the whole Andretti situation is a bit murky, as the investment firm that owns and operates Andretti's racing team, TWG Global, is still partnering with GM on the new F1 team, so Andretti isn't completely out of the picture in theory. You also might recognize that name, TWG Global, the personal investment vehicle and holding company for Mark Walter. For those that don't know, Walter is the CEO of Guggenheim Partners, an asset manager with $335 billion in AUM. Bloomberg has called Walter one of the world's 200 richest people, worth an estimated $13 billion himself, thanks to his personal investments in sports franchises like Chelsea and the reigning World Series champion, LA Dodgers. General Motors and TWG will pay a substantial fee to become F1's 11th team, offering up what is called an anti-dilution payment. While this might sound like some made-up buzzword used on Succession, it's actually a pretty logical concept. Since all F1 teams share in the revenue of the sport, a new team must pay a large enough fee to warrant existing teams adding them to that revenue-sharing agreement. Think about it like this. If your friends ordered a pizza for dinner, and then you suddenly wanted a slice or two, you'd have to offer up additional food to make up for the slices that were taken from your friends. So, how much is that fee? Well, the 2020 Concord Agreement among F1 teams stipulates that any new team must pay a $200 million entry fee to join the grid. However, with Formula One growing so much over the last few years and a new agreement expected to be in place by the time the 2026 season rolls around, BBC is reporting that General Motors and TWG have agreed to pay an anti-dilution fee of $450 million to secure the team's entry into Formula One. $450 million just to get in the door? And I thought getting into Augusta National was hard. That $450 million will then be split evenly among F1's 10 teams. Each team receives a $45 million payment in exchange for allowing Cadillac to participate in its broader revenue-sharing agreement. That includes things like international media rights and league-level sponsorships, but still leaves behind branded merchandise sales and team-specific sponsorships completely in the hands of each individual team. For some context, Formula One's parent company, Liberty Media, paid out $1.2 billion across its 10 teams in 2023, with each team receiving $120 million. If that $1.2 billion pot had to be split amongst 11 teams instead of 10, the amount would have been a little more than $109 million per team. That's why the anti-dilution fee exists. GM has to prove to other teams up front it won't negatively impact their collective bottom lines. However, it's not like Cadillac can just pay $450 million and start to reap all the financial rewards. In fact, it's just the opposite. If you look back at Red Bull's acquisition of the Jaguar F1 team, the only reason the sale was approved for $1 was because the deal required hundreds of millions in additional investment. And it's no different for Cadillac and General Motors. They're expected to start their F1 journey by purchasing engines from Ferrari, but that's only a temporary setup. Eventually, the General Motors-owned brand will be a works team. That means that they'll be responsible for designing, building, and supplying their own cars and engines. GM got a head start on this process thanks to Andretti Global's parent company, the aforementioned TWG, by investing significant money to show F1 it was submitting a serious bid. This included hiring technical employees from teams like Renault and Williams to start the initial car design. TWG also built out a satellite office near Silverstone Circuit in the UK, the same place where Mercedes and Aston Martin currently operate their F1 teams. And if that wasn't enough, TWG has also been using Toyota's wind tunnel in Germany to start performing aerodynamic and crash tests for its earliest F1 designs. So we know a little bit more about the cost and initial plans, but who is actually going to be hired to sit behind the wheel? While GM and Cadillac haven't announced their driver lineup for 2026, it's widely expected F1's newest team will try to pair a veteran driver with a rookie. Race-winning drivers like Daniel Ricciardo and Valtteri Bottas could fit the bill for the veteran spot, while someone like IndyCar driver Colton Herta might make sense for the latter. These hires would be smart, as it would provide Cadillac with valuable insight and intel into how top teams operate. Not to mention the fact that it would also help take advantage of F1's immense growth in the US. I've talked about this a lot recently, but I can't stress enough how big of a factor the American audience is in everything Formula One does. They've been pretty open about the fact that they probably wouldn't even be adding another team if it were just another European brand. Liberty Media recognizes that the only way to double the sport's enterprise value over the next decade, from $20 to $40 billion, is by expanding and attracting the American market. But similar to how Liberty Media expects to make money, so does General Motors. Just like the importance of the American market to F1, I've also spent a considerable amount of time explaining how the sport is used as a marketing platform for its international brands. Thanks to roughly 75 million viewers globally for each race, teams like Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari, and Red Bull use that inherently valuable TV time to build brand affinity to increase car or energy drink sales. Prior to the introduction of the cost cap in 2021, all of these teams used to operate in the red, with some of them losing hundreds of millions each year. However, since the cost cap was put into place, limiting how much teams could spend in a given year, 8 out of Formula One's 10 teams now turn an annual profit. Some teams, such as titans like Ferrari and Mercedes, have completely flipped the switch on their balance sheets, bringing in $130 million in annual operating profit last year alone. So while Formula One was once considered a glorified and inflated marketing department for its team's brands, it's now become a profitable operation, with every Formula One team worth at least $1 billion, according to Sportico. With that in mind, General Motors is clearly looking to capitalize on this change with its Cadillac team. They're already spending about $300 million annually on marketing, so they could potentially shift some of that money towards Formula One and reap a much bigger reward. Cadillac is one of the first automotive brands to ever exist in the world, and had already established itself as one of America's premier luxury car makers when they were bought by GM in 1909. Today, they sell around 390,000 cars each year, but most of those sales come through the United States and Canada. So if they're able to deepen their roots in more F1-minded European countries, Cadillac is likely to see an extremely valuable upside when they're added to the series in 2026. Now, Cadillac will never sell as many cars as Mercedes, but they do significantly more volume than luxury brands like Ferrari and Aston Martin. Thanks to the international appeal of a sport like Formula One, Cadillac can increase the brand's international penetration, where even just a few percentage points could yield big results. At the end of the day, though, you can no longer think about these decisions solely through marketing. It will always be a part of it, for sure, but that's not the business model anymore. Think about it. The average Formula One team is now bringing in $376 million in annual revenue and trading at a 6.1x revenue multiple. These are legitimate businesses now. They have thousands of employees and dedicated management teams. Deals like these shouldn't be looked at any differently than buying an NBA or MLB expansion team. So, whether General Motors ends up selling more road cars or not, their Formula One team should end up being a profitable asset entirely on its own.